afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California, this is Spiritual Fitness with your host, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. Spiritual Fitness is a program dedicated to exploring the timeless texts and practices of Bhakti Yoga for people who want wisdom in their everyday life. We have more than 25 members on Zoom and close to 50 members on Facebook. I do have Srivatsa helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to Spiritual Fitness.
Hi, thank you, JM. Good to see you and really happy to be back here at Spiritual Fitness. And good to see you all. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free, it doesn't matter how you're dressed, you can turn on the camera if you feel like it. We're all amongst friends here. It's a casual program, it's not corporate. And today we're going to talk about composting in the Bhakti garden. First thing is, we're all gardeners. Every one of us. And every plant we have in our garden, whether it's a weed or something that's producing fruits, we planted somehow or other, or we allowed to grow. And this is one of the bases for the context of growth in life is taking responsibility for one's own garden. So I love the garden metaphor, and this is the third time we've talked about it. And it's helpful because gardening's a process. There are various seasons that help us out. There are various conditions that help the garden or not. And we have to be prepared for all of them. And this is one of the themes of the wisdom literature, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutras, all the teachings of yoga, which means to live a balanced life. How is it that I can live in balance and actually use my life for creativity and refinement? Gardening has all of those things. And the great teacher of Bhakti is a kind of yoga. There are many different stairs on the ladder of yoga as described in the wisdom literatures that accommodate all of us at various times of our life and according to our proclivities and inclinations. And there's a way to connect. Yoga actually means to connect. It comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, and is cognate in English with the word yoke, to tie something together. And so we're tying ourself together with our source. And when we're in contact with our source, then there's a sense of wholeness. As we discussed in a class a few weeks ago, all forms of incompleteness are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole, or all forms of incompleteness are experienced due to our incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. We're always part of the complete whole, but when I fall out of awareness, if I may use that phrase, of my connection, then I feel incomplete. I'm not incomplete, but I feel that way. So yoga really means to come back into that feeling of completeness. And one of the great teachers of Bhakti, I was going to Chaitanya 500 years ago. He used this metaphor of gardening and how each one of us is a gardener. And one of his main students, who was a great scholar and wrote many informative books about the process of Bhakti Yoga, gave a definitive statement or a definition, a clear definition of the process of Bhakti. And in it, he used in Sanskrit the verb shil, which means to cultivate. Anushilanam. He said the process of yoga is best done when you follow the previous giants, those who have been successful in growing good gardens, as is the same with any discipline, following the giants. And also, shil means you have to do something. It doesn't just happen. So gardens don't happen. Brambles happen, jungles happen, but gardens are something a little bit different. I planned it. There was a blueprint. I decided what I want to have in my garden and what I don't want to have. It's selective. And the human experience is also based on this idea, and that is that although I do have basic instincts, I choose to reform some of them or direct the energies that are naturally there within me, the proclivities that I have, in a direction that is transformative in a good way. That is, I grow, I transform and I grow. So this is sort of the outline of the gardening metaphor, and it's useful. It's very helpful considering that, okay, just think of yourself as a gardener and think of your heart, your mind as the field. And you can plant there. You can also weed. You can also cultivate, fertilize, and so forth. And today, after speaking the last 2 weeks about the idea of watering, about planting seeds, actually, we talked about weeding first. And we talked last week about seeds and how everything that we come in contact with is a potential seed. The things that we hear, the kinds of association we have, it plants idea seeds in our mind. And we're extremely susceptible to those. And being selective in what kind of seeds you allow in, and then weeding out the things that are likely to drain nutrients from the soil and take away from your garden is important. And then today, the topic is composting. And how is it that you can take scraps, throwaways, and going into the metaphorical section, mistakes, missteps, things that seem to be useless in our life, and turn them into nutrient-rich soil so that we can actually grow. So that's the topic. First, I have a poll I'd like to run, just a preliminary poll. So if you can answer the poll really quickly when it comes up, then I'll kind of get a little orientation about what you're thinking.
So the poll is on. You can, yeah, I've started seeing answers as well. Thank you.
Can you see it, Subhadra? She can't see it.
People are polling. I'm seeing the responses.
It came up for a second, but then it disappeared.
You can click on the poll option below if you have.
Did anybody else not get it?
Yeah, we've got almost 27, 30 responses so far.
So we had mail-in ballots also. I hope you're counting them all.
Yeah, I think we'll get another 5 seconds and we'll close the poll. Thanks for
Okay.
responses. We have lots of them.
Well, we're eager to hear the results.
Yes, it's pretty positive.
Okay.
So I'm sharing the results. Let me know if you can see it.
How do you view failures or missteps? Multiple choice. A cause of anxiety, embarrassments, and opportunity for growth. 65% said opportunity for growth. 40% cause of anxiety and embarrassments. Okay. Thank you very much for voting, everybody. This is telling, and of course, there are opportunities in failure, and this is the metaphor for composting. So, what is a compost actually? Yes.
I was just thinking, looking at the result, what I found interesting was everyone did, like quite a few of them did select opportunities for growth, and that naturally, that's what mind tells. But within the heart, I saw the others are kind of true as well. It is a kind of anxious situation. So that's why it's changed from single to multiple, because I was not sure if it's always a single choice.
Good point. It starts off as one thing and it transformed into something else. And it could be anxiety. It could feel like a kind of what did we have? The second one, anxiety and?
Embarrassment. And that's true as well. Very
Yeah. Right. So how is it that those things can actually become transformative and become positive? Well, one of the ancient wisdom literatures, an Upanishad called the Sri Upanishad, gives this verse in Sanskrit: Vidyam chayas tad vedo bayam saha avidyayam ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashnute. That if you're able to use the juxtaposition of knowledge and ignorance, or failure and or darkness and light together, you're able to juxtapose and notice the difference between the two. It actually helps you to grow. There's a growth process that takes place in our struggles. And I can give some practical examples. One that really impressed me was when Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech at Stanford, and he talked about the most impactful times of his life. And they were traumatic experiences that seemed to be abject failures. For instance, when he got summarily voted out of his own board of directors in Apple, he felt as if his whole endeavor in his youth to develop the company and the product had come to naught. And how do you feel when you get kicked out of your own company? Anybody? The experience. You developed something, it was your idea, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and then somehow or other, you manage to either get yourself kicked out, or you're in a situation where you're kicked out and you're left on the outside. That might be slightly embarrassing, don't you think? And it may feel like, wow, it was all the waste. But then in the speech, he mentions how it got him thinking about ways in which the reasons he got involved in the first place. There are often times when I do something and I start getting successful at it, and then I forget why I'm doing it in the first place. I kind of get caught up in the process itself. This can happen in the practice of yoga or in refining oneself through a process. It can become ritual. So anything you do every day, any practice, including meditation, can lose its intentionality, or I can lose my intentionality while doing it. There's a technical term for this called Nehemograha. It's an interesting Sanskrit word. It has two parts, Nehemograha and Nehemograha. And it just happens to hinge on whether it's a long A or a short A in the middle. So Nehemograha means that I do the activity, but I'm not really thinking about why I'm doing it. I lose my intention. It just becomes rote. I can say a mantra, but I can be thinking about going to the mall and shopping or doing something else. I can be in meditation and my heart is elsewhere. It's not in it. And Nehemograha means that I stray from the practice altogether. I stop doing it. And so point is, when Steve Jobs was let go from his own company, he says in his speech that he re-examined his life. And he said, why did I get into this in the first place? What was my purpose? And isn't this one of the mantras nowadays that start with why? Why am I doing this? And keep asking that question. And oftentimes this doesn't come up in times when there's not something that seems like it is restricting me or some kind of traumatic experience. Jam, do you know where the slide is from Carl Jung?
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
Sorry. This caught my eye. He pointed out in his research of the human mind that there's a way in which oftentimes when we are in our darkest time, or as he said, the ever deepening descent into the unconscious suddenly becomes illumination from above. The ever deepening descent into the unconscious suddenly becomes illumination from above. And there's a way in which, thank you, Jam, there's a way in which oftentimes when there's a misstep or something, some kind of darkness comes into my life, that it causes me to look for the source of the light a little more carefully and more intensely. It brings out the original purpose, why I'm doing something. And this is an example of how we can turn, or how naturally, oftentimes, missteps, mistakes happen in our life that become the fodder for more growth. This is in the realm of composting. So let's look at a couple slides in just a second. But first, I just want to get any thoughts you might have when you looked at that poll. It was kind of a simple poll, but what were you thinking when you answered the way you did? Do you have any feedback just about that particular question or the topic itself and why you answered the way you did? You can put in chat, or you can also feel free to speak up. It's an open forum, so you just have to unmute yourself, and we really welcome you to say anything, whatever you're thinking.
Yeah, after when I read the poll question, I immediately tried to find where I fit the most in that answer response. Then I picked the one. When I looked into second one, I felt like, well, this is also true to some extent. And then the third one, I said, this is opportunity for growth. So as J.M. Prabhu mentioned, that it could be a possibility for growth, but my immediate reaction was, how do I feel at that moment when there's anxiety? So that's how I processed that response in the beginning. So
nice. And I think JM mentioned, of course, ideally might say, oh yeah, I see everything perfectly well when it happens and I can use it right away. But oftentimes it starts as something that seems to be really detrimental and disturbing and causes anxiety. The point here is, in the process of yoga, that is using every part of our life for growth and refinement, seeing ourselves as gardeners and our hearts, minds as the gardening space, then if I already have a process when these things come up, for instance, in composting, there's a place for everything. When I get all kinds of throwouts, there are scraps that I don't need to throw out, I just put them anywhere and spread them around. They don't have the same effect as if I've created a space. There's a bin, there's a place in the yard, in the field, where I put them all. And there's a kind of a process you put compost through so that it goes through the biological transformation and then becomes really nutrient rich. So yes, the anxiety comes, but then what do I do with it? And the verse I gave from the Upanishad says, everything that comes up in the human experience can be transformed into growth if you know where to put it. And the other point is, you know what the goal is. If you have a clear goal for your life, you're going somewhere. We talked about this previously, that the human experience is very temporary. It's called anityam. It doesn't last very long. We're only here for a short amount of time. So basically, we're just passing through. And if you can turn a temporary ride into something where you get lasting benefit, and this is based, then you're a very wise person. This is wisdom. JM, there's a few more things that are coming in. So
yeah, quite a few things are rolling in. So I thought I'll quickly go through them. Mala says, yet to develop detachment and not take it personally. So when a failure happens, it takes time not to be attached, like not to be detached and take it personally. Sheila says, in answering and seeing the results, I realize I tend to be negative in my thinking. Was surprised how many people saw the glass half full with their answers. I agree with Sheila. Like, my mind can maybe answer as the option, as an opportunity, but we always start with heart. And as we discussed earlier, we may not start with that. Nicole says heart
Wait,
washing.
I'll just,
Sure.
you know, what can be helpful in going into this point about composting. Composters have a specific place where they put things. You can use a bin. You don't have to have a bin. You just need to have a pile somewhere, but it has to be designated. And similarly, it's very helpful to have a mantra to keep with you when these kinds of reversals and failures come up. So one of them that I learned from my teacher years ago, it really affected me and gave me the wherewithal to at least process reversals, failures, and so forth. And that is, failure is the pillar to success. I know it's not a gardening metaphor, but it's pertinent nonetheless. There's a way in which just repeating that mantra when things come up, reminding myself failure is a pillar to success. Think about it in any learning process. A good example is language. If you're learning a second language, it's really important to fail a lot, because one of the ways in which researchers have said that you don't learn a second language is you're afraid to fail. You're afraid to say something wrong. Children, when they're learning, they use the grammar improperly, and then somebody else, parent or something, says, no, it's like this, and you keep hearing it and you get the correction. And if you're afraid to say anything, then you never use it, and it never comes out. So remembering that failure is the pillar of success. I see here Sebastian has maybe red socks. I can't tell from the picture, but you know, a batter who comes up to hit. If you hit 3 out of 10, you'll get millions of dollars. What about the other 7 times you failed? So if you're afraid to swing, of course, this is cliche practically, but it's worth remembering, keeping in mind to overcome the anxiety of failure.
Do you mind
So
if I ask one
mantras
question?
helps. Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Not at all.
I do love the mantra. I found a mantra this year. My therapist asked me to think of one, and it was so hard. And once I did, I'm a strong, a resilient woman. And when I say that to myself, there's something inside of me that reminds myself, you know, just saying that over, I should know it, but just saying it out loud, you can really feel it. My question is, so, you know, it's so black and white. Like, do you see it as anxiety, or do you see it as a room for growth? And with me, I think it depends on who I'm presenting it to and how they react. Because if it's somebody who allows me to grow and they understand what I can bring, then I feel like exciting. Like, yes, this is a challenge. I want to grow. But if it's somebody who does not have faith in my work, then I feel the anxiety. But I feel like I shouldn't let how they see me affect how I see it. Does that make sense? I'm trying to get over feeling anxiety simply because the other person puts that on me. I need to have control over my own feelings.
It makes perfect sense. Denise, thank you. And really, actually, in the yoga teachings, one of the most important aspects for growth in one's life is what's called Sangha. Sangha means the association that you keep. And being careful to keep good association, and especially that means those who are able to help you and refine yourself and to grow. We talked about this in the class on weeding, that maybe part of the, you know, when there are people in my life that prevent me from growing and have heavily negative influence on me in some of the ways that you were describing, don't have faith in you and things like that, then it can be a disincentive. So not extending yourself, although we have obligatory kinds of association, but it doesn't mean to become antisocial or to, you know, defriend, or what do you call it, unfriend everybody. But it does, although that may be an option in some cases. it does mean to be selective as possible of whom you expose your heart to, and your ambitions and your goals and so forth, because some people can actually help you and some people aren't so helpful. And actually, this is one of the main important parts of gardening, is being careful of which kinds of plants you allow in your garden, and which kinds of people we have in our life makes a big difference. Only share, the most intimate thoughts and ideas and accomplishments that you have with people that encourage you. Otherwise, it can be very discouraging. And even if you're in the environment, I know as a public speaker, sometimes I become inspired by the audience. And if I know in an audience, like I had an experience where I know a negative person walked in, I just happen to know who that person was, and they sat down in the audience. And then to some degree, I feel stifled. It's amazing how much energy one person carries around, either positive or negative. And so we're very susceptible to that. And that's one of the ways that we can grow, is be more selective.
One thing that I felt in reaction to that was, at first I feel embarrassed when I fail. And then I go, oh, well, I'm not perfect. And then I think, oh yeah, I'm not perfect. And it's a relief. And then I feel like, okay, then I can try again and fail. And it's not a big deal because I'm not perfect. So it kind of inspires me in that way.
Yes, a nice point. And another way of putting it is, you're not the controller either. We can only do our part. There's our sphere of influence and our sphere of concern. And if we do what we can with what we have, let the rest, just like in a garden, there's only so much you can do. Do the best you can in planting a garden, taking care of it. The rest of it has to do a lot with the natural forces that are there. And I once, when I had my business, there was a major misstep, and it put me in a lot of anxiety. I called my business mentor, and he said, oh, you're not the supreme controller. And immediately I felt relief. Oh yeah, well, okay, I did what I could. It didn't go my way, but I'm not the controller. What can I do? I do the best I can with what I have. Nice one. Thank you. Okay, what else from the...
So we have Nikul, who said heart was saying one thing, but mind was saying something else. Then Srivatsa posted from Facebook, Prasto said, in the moment, the struggle is hard, but hindsight, we are grateful for what we learn. And then Jean says, seeing it as opportunity comes from a secure place. Seeing it an anxiety comes from an insecure place. If you are secure within yourself, you can turn these things to your advantage. If you're insecure, it'll be more to the detriment.
Yeah. And partly the reason I brought this up is to develop a sense of security, which means that it's already a process that I have built in, that I take what happens to me as a way to grow. And whether it seems to be good or bad, I know where to put it so that I can use it. And let's show a few slides, because this will put it a little bit into perspective. Yes.
Sure. I'll just, there's one more question about what are the examples of mantra. I think Takam has joined. So we would be walking through some mantra slides in the end, so you can see some of the mantra examples. So let me start sharing.
Yeah, I use the term mantra. I mean, man means mind in Sanskrit. Tra comes from the word trayate, which means to deliver or to rise above, to free oneself. So the mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. And as we've talked about when we went into much of the material here a few weeks ago, over a couple months, the psychology of yoga, which is really meticulously laid out by Patanjali thousands of years ago. And he describes how the mind is a surface. Well, it's like a cloud, like a digital cloud in which we store things. And we're taking in information all the time. The mind, which is also called the chitta, is a very subtle substance. It's not us. We're not the mind. We're the observer of the mind. We're the sentience, which is non-neural, non-chemical, non-biological. We're beyond the material elements of which the mind is part. And the mind itself, when it has the wrong algorithms, it becomes a source of disturbance to us. The process of meditation is meant to overwrite those bad algorithms and to develop new ones. And so this is the process of developing the mind, actually, in such a way that the mind then becomes a friend. And we're able to use the mind as a useful tool for its real purpose, according to the yoga teachings, which is to become more aware of yourself, because, and not in an egoistic sense, because the ego is something that's also called the false self. I have a false sense of who I am. And I said, I used a lot of that phraseology, non-neural, non-chemical, non-biological. We're something different from the body. And it's my identification with the body and mind, where I say, I am this body, I am this mind. Not only that, I'm all the things around me that I identify with. For instance, I am my car, I am my sports team. And when these things change, then I'm in anxiety because I'm identified with them. So the Patanjali teaches us that the yoga process really means that we get a higher perspective. We're able to see ourselves. And in the Bhagavad Gita, when the teacher, Krishna, is asked by his student, Arjuna, what is the symptom of somebody who's fixed in consciousness? He gives this response, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atman yevatmana tushta stita pragnasta dochite. So stita means to be fixed. When you're fixed in consciousness, he said, Prajahati means you're able to disassociate yourself with the churnings of the mind and with your life situation that's going on around you. Prajahati yada kaman, and the mind, he said, is a factory that's producing all kinds of desires and ideas constantly. And you're able to not feel compelled or impelled to grab onto every one of them. You're very selective. And Atman yevatmana tushta. Tushta means to be satisfied. And then he says to be able to take satisfaction in the self. In other words, who you are, what you are as an entity is completely satisfying. And the only reason I'm not satisfied is because I'm not aware of who I am. And that's parallel with the statement I made in the beginning from the Upanishads, that all forms of incompleteness are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole, or or a lack of my sense of connection to the complete whole. Okay, a few slides to follow a thought process, and that is transform waste into life. And it really, in the garden, it comes into view, the process through which old things, discarded things, then go through a process and they come out the other side as fodder for life. And if we look at the processes around us, everything's going through transformation. One of the deciding factors of whether somebody feels satisfied in their life has to do with how flexible he or she is. There have been studies about longevity, just from an empiric point of view of what are some of the factors that allow people to live into old age. Of course, there are many factors, including genes, lifestyle, and so forth. But one of the lifestyle aspects that was most telling and consistent is people's flexibility. That is, life goes on, things change. Are you able to change with them? Are you able to accommodate change, or do you become brittle and you're broken by it? So this is one of the teachings of yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, Krishna mentions that everything's constantly changing around us. We're not changing, but everything is changing around us. Disneyland, Orlando, Florida. There's a ride, or whatever you call it, an exhibit. Maybe it's not there anymore. I know it was there in the 70s. It was called Magic Carpet. And it's a huge theater that the guests would enter into. And there was no seats, but there were bars to hold on to. And when the people would enter, they think, what are these bars here for? And then when the movies start, you'd be flying. And due to the effect of the cinematic effect on the surround screen, you have this sense you're flying through the air, and everyone would grab onto the bar. And so similarly, as Patanjali describes, our mind is a cinema. We're stable. We're always the same. There's a steadiness to our existence, but the life situation around us is constantly changing. And therefore, I experience it as the world is changing. The ancient example that's given before this kind of technology, obviously, was of a water pot. And so take a water pot on a full moon night, you put it outside, and it's full to the top with water, and put it where you can reflect the moon into the water pot. And now notice that the moon is nicely reflected on the water, and then tap the pot. And now the ripples make the moon appear to be fragmented, or at least the moon appears to be moving, non-stable. So the surface of our mind is like that water. It's called the chitta. It's a clear, glassy, very pure substance. And the world is reflected into it. But when the chitta is moving, then I see the world to be moving. It's actually not moving, but I witness it that way. If somebody has a high fever, you start to go over 104 degrees, then you hallucinate. You start to see the world moving around you, whereas you're sitting there or lying there in the bed, but the world's moving. So similarly, the world appears to be moving, but it's not. So flexibility, learning to let go, but compost it. Let go of things, but put them in the compost. And that is, they go into that space where everything's useful. All the experiences of my life, they're not failures, they're just experiences. And from that composting process comes knowledge, and it becomes nutrient rich, fertilizer for new seeds and growth. After all, what is maturity anyway? If you talk about a mature person, it's somebody who's gone through a lot of changes. They've had their share of failures. The proverbial sea captain has been across the ocean, has almost died a few times, and therefore has this countenance that is unmistakably venerable. And that comes through life experiences. So these are necessary for growth. Lying under heaps of discarded thoughts, empty dreams, disappointments, lost loves, and confusion, there is the possibility of wisdom, actual wisdom, which is different from knowledge. Knowledge is something I can get from a book. And in the yoga process, there's two different categories. One is called gyan, which means knowledge that you get from a book, and vigyan, that knowledge applied in the world that becomes wisdom. I wonder if anybody, have you ever entertained the difference between knowledge and wisdom? I like to play around and look at words, but what do you think about the difference between the two? Does that strike you at all, anybody? a difference between knowledge and wisdom?
You can read a story and know the context of the story and what happened in the story, but if you don't live the character and experience what happened, then it's only head knowledge.
Oh, thank you. It kind of remains theoretical.
Absolutely, it's like someone going through a rough time in their life. They, maybe their wife's stage 4 cancer, and then has a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and can't has a job to hold and all kinds of stuff, and all these things happening, and someone's like, oh wow, I totally feel for you, I feel how you're doing, and like all this stuff, and you realize that yeah, that's nice of them, that's very, very nice, but they don't really know what you're going through, so because they haven't experienced it themselves.
Yeah. Nice point. Yeah. And that grows into empathy also, doesn't it? That's another point that's made in the Bhagavad Gita, that the best yogi is the person who's developed empathy through his or her own experience and can appreciate what other people are going through at the same time, because they've been through it themselves and have also processed it. Jam, there's a few more, I think, coming in the chat.
Yeah.
One other piece for that, the earlier was like the experience is like either you judge it as bad or good, or you give it, you experience it as a non-attachment, like I think you mentioned earlier, where it's just like you accept it as what's this going to be like, and not non-judgment, right? Equanimity, I think is.
I like that, equanimity. Yes, whatever comes, I look at it as an opportunity for refinement. And there may be, for instance, reversals. How else do I grow without some kind of friction, without some kind of reversal in my life? And this is one of the quintessential teachings of yoga, and that is that use what comes to you, especially reversals, as an opportunity to think about your existential position in the world and what to do about it. Yes. And also, when good things come, did I create this, or did it come of its own accord, just the way so-called bad things come of their own accord? What else, Jam?
Yeah, we have quite a few. Shruti, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that wisdom always have this peace of mind because we are not attached to that knowledge. Knowledge may, when it comes to mind, people with knowledge may just feel like they are attached to the circumstances or what happens. But with wisdom, you have that knowledge, but because you feel that you are not attached to something external, so you always will have this peace of mind no matter what it happens.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, there can be a way in which I become overburdened with knowledge that I collected, whereas wisdom tends to be accompanied by humility. This is a point that's made in the Bhakti teachings, and that is that along with actual growth, spiritual growth, comes a very deep humility called dainya. In fact, they're practically synonymous. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the description of where knowledge comes from is preceded. There's 20 items, and the first 2 are humility and pridelessness. And that leaves one open to the secrets of the world. And as I'm hearing you speak about this, Miriam, it's this idea that when you actually become wise, you also become humble. You're not burdened by the knowledge that, hey, look at me, I learned. Would that be an accurate assessment of what you said?
Yeah, it's like always you feel of yourself and your existential as something that's not accept any turbulence from outside. No matter how much knowledge you have, you feel like you have your existence no matter what.
Ooh, I like that. Yes. Actually, this is a term in the Bhagavad Gita. This is called dhira. Dhira means that you're not movable. You despite the changing circumstances, whether they're up or down, that you are steady because you see that you have an existence beyond the external changing world. And you're able to make something of it, whatever situation you're in. Thank you. Excellent.
You have one more, quite a few of them. I'll read a couple of them. One is wisdom is using your knowledge. That this is by Neela. Example: knowledge says a pot is hot. Wisdom will be not to touch it with bare hands.
Nice.
And then see, Gokul says wisdom is not to have any set ideas. Blanca says wisdom could be knowledge proven by love. And Jay says they are both sources of pride of possession, but wisdom is a matured form of data retention. We tend to worship those with wisdom and revere those with knowledge. Yeah, and those are like some of the things which have come. There are others as well.
Insightful. Thank you very much.
I can quickly go to the remaining slides if you wish.
Okay. So a few more thoughts. I like this one, this quote about under the heaps of discarded thoughts, empty dreams, disappointments, lost loves, and confusions. Wisdom can grow. It can emerge from that. So not to despair. So there is a way to participate with the process. And this is the whole point. Composting really is something deliberate. Obviously, all these things happen to us in a lifetime, however long or short it may be, but we can participate with the process. That's what composting is. And with that participation, we accelerate nature's miracles. So as I said before, if you're very deliberate about where you put all your trimmings, all the leftovers, you put it in one place and you process it a little bit. You don't need to do too much for composting. Then a miracle happens and it turns into this nutrient-rich soil. So same thing with all the things that happen to us in our life. Back to what we said previously, sow uncommon seeds if you want an uncommon result. This is one from one of my favorite authors and teachers of writing, Anne Lamott. She says, time and showing up turn most messes to compost and something surprising will grow. Time and showing up. So really, you have to give it time and you really do have to show up for it. Don't waste a good crisis. During the pandemic time, for some of the corporate teams I've been working with, this was our mantra. It's a common mantra, but it's very helpful in these times. Don't waste a good crisis. This is the time to really find out how will I use this opportunity as an opportunity to grow. And the ones that thought like that, as we've been taking inventory, going through this together over the last 7 months, have really done some remarkable things just because of that attitude. Big growth in some areas that were hinged really on, we saw at some point when everyone embraced this idea that yes, this is a time for growth. It's a good time. We can compost this and use it. Here are a few lessons. Make a productive space to put your mistakes and faults in and then leave them alone to compost. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to micromanage it, but you do have to have a place to put it. And there's a miracle that takes place in your own mind and heart over time if you categorize it in a way that lets it do its natural thing, which is turn into compost. And that's one of the lessons of nature. So we're just facilitating. Nature does the rest. Garbage, rich and nourishing. So let the time factor deal with the scraps. Scraps don't make good compost unless you let them sit for 9 to 12 months, which feels like an eternity, which brings me to a quote from James Clear. that I really liked. He put this out the other day, a couple of days ago. He said, be radically proactive about any behavior that pays off in 10 years. Be radically proactive about any behavior that pays off in 10 years. So be aware of the fact that the composting you're doing now will pay off in the long run. The kinds of little habits you're developing now and the way that you're processing the mistakes, failures, and so forth that are coming up inevitably as you move forward. Look forward to a decade. If you think like that, you'll feel this kind of steadiness and equanimity that Miriam talked about. Another quote from a thinker who was mentioning the metaphor of composting in her writings in relationship to Anne Lamott's class. She said, I don't have to make it happen, it just will. So how sweet to embrace the slow, effortless effort of the compost bin, the effortless effort. So, there is a sense that these things happen by nature's course if you just keep the space for them, and then it'll develop. Trust that time and oxygen will do their work, and that they will even feed the next cycle of growth. And we saw this one from Carl Jung. And so the surprise comes as an example in areas where I had composted in my yard this spring. I got some of the best plants were volunteers, and they came right out of the compost pile. The other seeds I had planted in soil and so forth, they did okay, but the real champions grew right out of the garbage, and they volunteered. And so if you create a space where you're actually open to letting these various events in your life compost, then amazing things will volunteer out of there. All kinds of people will come into your life that you'll recognize as being mentors, and ideas that you'd never thought of before will grow out of that composting process. So one of the ways to do this is to be very deliberate. And yoga, as I said earlier, is a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of organizing your human energy so that you can get the most out of it, just like a gardener utilizes space to grow something, to grow fruits and flowers they're useful and beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. So our lives can be like that also by composting. Let's
Ram,
just take any comments. Yes.
Yeah, Ram has a question.
Yeah.
A very nice question. Please help. What's the productive space to put your failures to compost? In other words, how do we apply compost to meditation?
Well, one of the ways is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and that is to be aware of the fact that although there are changes taking place in life, first of all, understand that they're inevitable. One of the ways in which I'm not able to compost is I hang on to everything and I say, no, it has to stay the way it is. But if I embrace the changes that are taking place, and one of the listeners today had mentioned detachment. I like to put it as a broader perspective, as it gives a kind of clear definition. If I have a clear perspective in life that actually this one lifetime I'm in now is just one frame in a long continuum, a movie that's going on. I'm moving from one position to another. This is called samsara. This is not the only life. I'm moving from one situation to the next. I happen to be in a very advantageous situation right now. And this is if I think of it as a contained period of time. I have a certain amount of time through forced efficiency. I think, let me use this opportunity in this very short human life to get a most uncommon fruit, not an ordinary fruit, an uncommon fruit. And I think of my life as a field in which to produce and refine. Then, when this is the productive space. In other words, think of your lifetime as a space. It has a determination that has the word terminus in it. There's a beginning and an end, and therefore you're clear that there's a boundary to it. So use it for a higher purpose. This is the point. And what's the higher purpose? It's really to become self-realized, to understand that you're not your body, you're not your mind, you're actually a sentient being beyond that, and you have a relationship with your original source.
We have another question from Facebook from Adam. How does this spiritual consciousness, being different from material plane, experience the pains of mortality?
Well, one of the differences is the difference between when, again, in perspective. So I've given this example previously. It bears repeating that, let's say you're sitting on your couch and you hear your car outside being hit, and you jump up, your heart's pounding, you begin to perspire, your mind's reeling because you think, oh, I didn't pay my insurance. Then you look out the window and see it wasn't your car. Then you see your neighbor running down his driveway and he's experiencing all the symptoms you just experienced because it turns out it was his car. So what's the difference? It was my identification. So from a self-realized perspective, it's how I identify myself. And when I see my life and my life situation to be different, that is, I am the life, I'm the witness, I'm watching everything going on around me, but actually this is not me. It's an unfolding world around me. From that perspective, the person who's in trained consciousness and elevated consciousness sees that I don't ever mix with this world. And from there, one moves about the world in a more effective way. There's an enlightened engagement with the world. I use everything for a higher purpose. And so we have things, we have to interact with things. We can't give them up. We also can't stop thinking or desiring. However, in the path of bhakti or yoga, there's a way in which we dedicate things for a higher purpose, and that's service, selfless service. That's the path through which we actually feel satisfaction, and it's from a self-realized perspective. None of these things are mine, but if I use them in service, I'll feel satisfied.
Any other questions or reflection? You can put it on chat or unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I'm going to go into some mantras to leave us with.
Yeah.
And one of the practices of bhakti, besides philosophizing as we're doing now and finding ways in which to compost, weed, water, part of the watering process is through mantra meditation. Sonic stimulation means there are different levels of sound vibration. The mantra comes from a higher stratum. The kind of mantra I'm talking about now is a formula that's passed down through great meditators who have realized particular sound vibrations that are extant, and they simply pass them down the way you'd pass down a ripe mango from the top of a tree to others below. So the mantra is an avatar. Avatar means that which comes from a higher level to a lower level, a higher perspective to another perspective in order to give us some help. So there are a couple of mantras that have been passed down over generations that are extremely powerful, that are used in mantra meditation. The first one is Nitai Gauranga. And to do mantra meditation, I recommend find a quiet place. If you're disturbed by your phone or your Apple Watch or whatever you might have, I recommend getting a box that you can buy these now online, where you can lock your phone in the box for a certain amount of time, and you can't open it until it opens again. In other words, get yourself free from your environment for just a little while so you can introspect, and then use the mantra, which is an avatar, to bring you a higher perspective. So sit if you can, and let's try this for a moment. Sit a little straighter than you were a second ago. You can close your eyes if you like. And I'm going to say the mantra 7 times, and you can repeat it with me behind muted mics, and just feel the vibration and bring your mind back to the mantra as you're saying it. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga. And the next mantra is called the Maha Mantra. It has these 3 words, Hare, Krishna, and Rama. And this is a mantra that is from the Kali Sartarana Upanishad, thousands of years old, but it's a mantra that sages, yogis have engaged in chanting for many, many millennium. And it goes like this: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And I'll say this mantra 5 times. You can follow behind muted mics. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when you're doing your gardening, this is like water in the garden. It helps you to process everything that you've composted. The mantra really is miraculous kind of formula that synchronizes all the energies in your process of spiritual gardening and brings them to bear. And I find that when I do this in the morning time, it's especially effective. It's worth getting up a little earlier than others in your household if you live with others, or before you have other duties to do, and just carve out some time for yourself and listen to the sound vibration. And to just finally, we'll take any last comments you have, any thoughts that you're taking away in your pocket as we leave today. You can put them in the chat box. What would you say is the main thought that you're taking away? The main idea that you feel is usable? Jay said, thank you for sharing. Oh, they're going too fast, JM. You can read them.
Sure. Rajesh says, my life and life situation are two different things. Raj says, your life is just a frame. And Gokul wants to know the meaning of mantra. So man means mind. What does tra mean? Tra means deliver the mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deliver. And then Jay says, thank you for sharing your soul gardening wisdom. Lots of thank yous. Blanca says, everything good or bad is useful after some time, and all you have to do is go back to it. Subhadra says, keep intentionality in your actions. Ram says, thank you. And we are not our mind. Nikul says, Brenda says, thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And in our last, before we leave, namaste. So before we all sign off, make me just unmute and say where you're listening in from. What city are you in? City, state,
Fremont.
country? Fremont. Yay, Fremont.
Concord.
Where?
Concord.
Concord. I love Concord. Okay.
Cedar City, Utah.
What city?
Austin.
Cedar City, Utah.
Utah. Utah, fantastic. What a beautiful, clean state Utah is. Thanks for tuning in. Who else? Let's hear
Portland,
from
Oregon.
Portland, Oregon.
Portland.
San Francisco.
Yay, Portland, Oregon.
Me too.
Folsom, California.
Marcario, are you in Portland also?
I sure am. I'm in Chinatown.
Fantastic. Wow, great.
And Chandler, Arizona.
Arizona. Chandler?
Yes, Chandler.
Nice. I spent a little time there.
Mexico, en
So
Aguascalientes.
what city?
Aguascalientes.
Fantastic. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in.
Austin, Texas.
Yay, Austin.
Sunnyvale, California.
42 miles surrounded by reality. I love that town, Austin.
California.
Which California?
Hillsborough.
Hillsborough. Nice. Hillsborough. Beautiful place.
Yeah.
Chicago.
Chicago. Excellent.
Portland.
Another Portland. Boy, let's hear for Oregon. 4 more.
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon.
Yes. Folsom, California.
Folsom, California. Portland, Oregon. Folsom, California. Excellent.
Fremont, California.
Fremont. Yes. 2 more.
Sunnyvale, California.
Yay, Sunnyvale. Last
San
one.
Jose.
It's the last word. San Jose. Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody. I really enjoyed being with you today and look forward to next week. And I hope that there's one thought that you take away that leaves you in a better than you were. And remember that where attention goes, energy flows. And the main trick in elevating the consciousness and staying in yoga is always keep the transcendental sound vibration going. Thank you very much, JM, for making it all happen. And I'll see you soon.